Welcome to Become an Idol. I'm Dr. Robin Sargent, owner of Idol Courses. This is the place where newbies come to learn and veterans share their knowledge. I have here with me today Mohsin Memon, and I met Mohsin through LinkedIn as usual. I saw him in my feed and we've connected and we chatted a moment about gamification and the gamification training that he does. And I said, instead of going to your training, would you come talk to me and the people on the podcast? So that is my very brief introduction. So Mohsin, will you please do a better job of introducing yourself?
Thank you. I think you did a pretty good job, Robin. Thank you for having me here. My name is Mohsin. I am a game designer and I build games for learning. And over the last 6 years, I've been doing that. I've built a bunch of immersive games that are immersive in by design, not so much by technology. Because these days, when we think about immersive, we think about augmented or virtual reality. So what I mean is immersive by design. So people are immersed in the gameplay while they're playing the game. So that's kind of what I do. I build games for learning, and I work with a bunch of learning professionals and helping them learn how to do the same.
Oh my gosh. I know. I bet everybody's like, ooh, I want to do the same. How do you do this? So, but before we get into that, I want to know, how did you get started? Did you start off in another field? Did you start out knowing you wanted to be a game designer? Were you something else and then you niched down? Well, tell me that story.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of what happened actually. I started out in IT. I worked as um, a project manager for Delta Airlines and Walmart for a few years back in the States. And about 10 years ago, I decided I wanted to kind of change my career path and get into learning. So I started out being a learning designer and I got into facilitation. So I did a lot of classroom and virtual facilitation experiences. And then eventually I started using more and more activities in my programs. And I realized that games was going to be the way to go. I played a lot of games as a kid, but I never actually had a chance to build one of my own. And one of my clients gave me an opportunity. I just did it. I didn't. They were willing to fund it, so that was my green flag, and they trusted me enough to do it. So I built my first game, and then one step led to another. I said, hey, I can actually do this, and so now I build games for learning, and I also teach game design, by the way, at a French design institute.
What was your first game that you built? You have to describe this.
Yeah, wow. The first game I built was more of a simulation. I was working with uh, a finance company, and they had a bunch of people uh, who were credit assessors and people who would validate the person's profile to evaluate if they should give them the loan or not. And the problem statement that came to me was that these credit evaluators tend to really double down on some of these people, and they don't do a very good job of evaluating the risks. And sometimes they give loans to people that they shouldn't give loans to. Sometimes they give loans to people, don't give loans to people that they should give loans to. So what can we do? So I said, what if we build a simulation that kind of simulates a similar environment just in a classroom? And so I became the customer and I built this whole story around it. And I came in with, three different scenarios. One scenario was where I was the customer. I was trying to get a loan for a skydiving business, and I was trying to do different things. And then they would have to ask me specific questions in order to get to the bottom of, what's really going on, and whether decide whether they want to give me a loan or not. And that led to a significant improvement in their business, in the kind of loans that they were offering eventually. And that was my first game ever.
And what did it look like? So it's almost like a scenario driven type of game. And so did you have it look like regular characters that they were just kind of making choices or and asking questions? Or
Yeah.
did you have a whole nother layer of fantasy on top of that.
No, so this one was kind of a serious game because it was more simulated environment of what was going on in real life, and this was actually a classroom game. So we would play the game in the classroom environment with a group of people, and it was a complete pen and paper game. There was no technology, no support mechanisms. This was, I mean, the first game. Today I build games with technology that really leverage technology to the next level. But back then, my very first game was just pen and paper. It's kind of like a prototype, if you will.
I love it. Okay. And so when you made your first one, I mean, how much research did you do into game or game mechanics, or did you feel like it just kind of made sense to you? Just kind of all clicked like, well, we're just gonna put them through different scenarios and layer some story on there and get them engaged, or what kind of prep did it take you?
Yeah, well, I did it overnight. I'm just kidding. No, I did not do it over. I did not do it overnight. I did a lot of research with the people themselves who were, because I was building a serious game, so that required a lot of industry insight. And I did not come from a finance background, so I had to ask all these questions about, how do you normally approve loans and what goes into it, and what kind of questions should people be asking. So I knew what good behavior looked like. I knew what bad behavior looked like. And then it was a question of how do we gamify this? How do we, turn it into points and badges and mechanics that would kind of flow together? And it took me a while. It took me close to a month to build it, and a series of iterations through which I continuously improved the game. But eventually, when it was complete, done, it was actually a very scalable system that you could teach to a facilitator, and they could go and deliver it on their own without really knowing or having any facilitation skills either.
Amazing. Okay. And so that was your first spark. Now you said it was a client that, basically funded your first, um, beta project and creating this game. And so, were you a freelancer at the time?
No, I was working with a company called MemCorp Immersive Learning at that time, and
Uh-huh.
and they're a learning training provider company. So this was through them because they were their learning partner of this client company.
Are you still with a company or are you out on your own?
Now I work with another company called Gamitar Learning, and I'm the learning director there now.
And you're a learning director. So do you still get to design games?
Absolutely. I really get to do the stuff that I love doing now more than ever, which is game design. And I've been getting into a little bit of coding recently, so that's been helping me kind of really understand the inner mechanics of how to build some of these things. And that's been a huge help as well.
Can you share with us, like, just, I mean, how big are your projects right now that you work with Gamitar? I mean, is it full, like a very immersive game with all the bells and whistles like you'd expect, playing on an Xbox, or
It's
describe this for us. I
sure,
mean, what kind of projects you
sure.
can disclose?
It's a good blend, but the bulk of my work is around two areas. One is with very somewhat large scale projects where there is a need to train anywhere from 5,000 to 15,000 or 20,000 people, and all of those people need to go through a certain simulation or go through a game or a game-based learning experience. So I'll tell you about a client that I'm working with right now. It's a financial institution, very, very large company, and they want to ensure they've got an entire learning curriculum, an entire learning program, and they're leveraging tools like Degreed and all these other LMSs that's out there. But their biggest concern is how do we get people there, right? And how do we get people to learn there? Not just get them there, but also learn something. So we built this entire game system, which takes in content, which can be fully customized, and awards them points, and then asks them questions about the material that they're supposed to learn. And then as they learn those things, it awards them points that they then use to unlock these superpowers that they can use to save these different cities that are in danger. And that becomes their goal. So their goal is to save these cities. And then there's another secondary and tertiary goal over that, which is that they are competing against other teams that are in the same environment, in the same ecosystem. So imagine there are these 5,000 people who are going through this experience, and there are teams of like 500 people. And there could be 10 teams that are going against one another. So it's kind of like, Harry Potter's red house, blue house, green house, whatever. And so all of these different teams are trying to do their best. And the more they learn, the more cities they save, the better their team does. So that's an example of what I'm working on these days.
And then do they award prizes for the best team?
Oh yeah, absolutely. They've got monthly prizes for the best team and there are different ways of evaluating. So there are some best learners who may not be from the best teams, and that's one of the things that we thought about. We didn't want to create a disadvantage for a learner just because that individual happened to be in a team that doesn't care about learning. Because they will be there, they're always there, and so we wanted to award the individual activity as well as the team activity, because it is a team game as well, where one person can encourage the other person. And this really facilitates a lot of social learning as well.
So it's all kind of built on top of their learning management systems and their content, almost like if you were to put GamiPress on your WordPress site. I mean, I'm simplifying.
Kind of. We've built this tool. It's a game called Superhero Within, and the Superhero Within integrates with a lot of these LMS technologies. It can also work standalone as a separate tool entirely, and it kind of runs the entire gamification or gamifying of the learning via content and activities.
All right, so you started getting into games, and I'm sure that you went down rabbit holes of game theory and driving behaviors through like a gamified learning theory. So I noticed you kind of talked about, you really had to find out what your learners do right and what they do wrong and really analyze where they come from. But what other things do you take into consideration before right when you start to design the game, right? Because before you ever start developing anything, I'm sure you lay out your game plan. So what does that look like? What's kind of that process you guys go through?
Wow, that's such a great question and such a tricky one too, because there's so much that goes into it. I'm not sure if I can do justice to that question, in at one go, but I'll try. I'll try because it's such a lengthy process. It's kind of like asking a director, how do you make a movie? You know,
Uh-huh.
because this is the closest thing that most people can relate to that game designers do. They are actually directors of movies, and you've got to take into account the script, the audio, the visual, the actors, the audience who's watching the movie, everything from start to end. And so really what goes into the games that I tend to design is that it starts with an objective. It starts with, why are we designing this game? Why is this here? you know and one of the things that I like to do a lot is to focus on which are the key mechanics that we're going to introduce into the game. In fact, incidentally, I'm currently writing a series of posts with the hashtag 21 game mechanics, and you can just search this hashtag on LinkedIn. And I've published 5 articles so far in this category, and each month or so I will write about one mechanic, and I try to make it very, very specific to the learning industry so that instructional designers and learning practitioners can use what I'm writing and learn about how they can use a certain mechanic like freedom or like variety or a mechanic like feedback or purpose or vision, and use these mechanics to enhance their own learning content, their own learning programs and designs. So to answer your question, really, it starts with the objective, and then there are then mechanics, and then there are layers of story and art and all of these things that go on top of it. And a big consideration is also the budget, because games can cost a bit to make, and they can cost anywhere from, I don't know, $50,000 all the way up to 500, if not more, $1,000 to build. And so what is it that what kind of a range we're operating in will also dictate how we go about which elements to introduce and not.
Are there any kind of rules or rules of thumb that you use when thinking about mechanics, how they combine, how many make something more, repeatable or playable than others? Are there any kind of rules like that, or is it just like you use the mechanics to drive the behaviors that you want to enforce? Or is it something else that you think about when you think about combining your different mechanics?
Yes and no. I mean, the way mechanics work, they're kind of like tools, or they're kind of like parts that come together. Some work on their own, some work with others really, really well. So to give you an example, one of the games I designed is a game called Evive, and I've built an entire certification program around Evive to help learning practitioners use Evive to facilitate their own learning experiences as well. And the objective of Evive is to facilitate collaboration, but it its objective is to facilitate collaboration under the backdrop of competition. So if teams don't see that they need to collaborate and they don't talk about collaboration, or they don't talk about a common goal, then teams can end up competing against one another and not achieve the common goal. So the mechanics in this context was, okay, how do we first get teams to compete with one another? And then how do we get them to see that they will do better if they collaborate with one another? And so that is a process of realization that we have to take people through. It's kind of like a journey, you know? And just the way you've got a journey in life with realization and reflection that leads to certain changes and shifts in your mindset and your thought process, the same thing happens in a game environment, because people are going through this journey. It's kind of like they've lived a life together and they've had certain realizations which will leave them changed at some level or another.
That reminds, isn't there a game theory about collaboration, right? Where it's all about the only way to win is to cooperate. You know what I'm talking
I
about?
do. I do. You're talking about Nash's equilibrium, and
Yes.
and that's part of game theory. And I think learning game theory is very, very important for not just game designers, but really anybody who wants to understand people and understand how people operate, because every single person that you meet is trying to increase their payout or payoff. And in doing so, they are taking certain actions which are helping them move along that path. I think learning professionals who understand game theory and Nash's equilibrium end up designing better learning programs than those who don't.
So should we send them? Like, do you want to send out some recommendations right now where people can go and learn about game theory? Should they just type
Yeah,
that into Google or
they
what?
can. They can. I mean, there's so much material around game theory that you could just type it. And I don't know if you've seen this movie, A Beautiful Mind, Russell Crowe. I don't know if you've seen that. Pretty
Yeah.
pretty old movie. But that's Nash basically. That's John Nash, and he's the one who founded or discovered Nash's equilibrium.
Okay, so what is this you teach instructional designers how to design games, and I'm sure that while you don't want to give away your whole class right now, what are some, I mean, what's kind of like the outline look like? What's the kind of things that you teach instructional designers? What are the questions that they have, or what kind of level do you
Sure,
teach in
sure.
that class? Yeah.
So I'll try and maybe start a little bit with the purpose of why did I start doing this, and then I'll tell you what I do teach. Is that okay?
Of course.
Cool. So I realized that a lot of learning professionals, instructional designers, and learning practitioners who are facilitators would love to use games for learning, and I know that because I have so many friends, and I've been that, right. I've done that bit of work for a very long time, so I resonate and I understand that it's very, very important to create engagement for our learners. Yet at the same time, I realized that building a game is expensive, and it's a very specific skill that is required to do this. So I began to think, and I said, what if there was a game which was adaptive and it allowed facilitators to use the way that they wanted to? What if there was a game that allowed them to make some changes, some small changes in their design, and allow them to facilitate it for competencies like collaboration, communication, problem solving, decision making, strategic thinking, and beyond, right? So there's a range of 6 or 7 competencies that we've identified that are most commonly facilitated or run in the corporate arena. And so my endeavor was to build this game and then make it available for learning practitioners around the world to use. And once I built it, the question was, all right, now I've got to teach them how to use this thing. And that's where the facilitation certification program came from, or the game-based learning certification program came from. And so basically the outline, it starts with, it's a 4-week long program. It starts with learners first going through the game itself. They've got to play the game, and when they play the game, they get a full appreciation of what goes into it and develop empathy so that they're able to understand what a typical learner will go through as they're playing the game as well. And the second week is about understanding the technology and how to work it. The third week is about understanding the mechanics that are inside the game so that they can tweak the different mechanics to address the various needs and learning objectives that they might have. And the fourth final week is their final submission, where they actually conduct a live game, a live multiplayer online game-based learning session for their community or their friends and family or people that they want to bring into the experience to let them try. And it's a very, very practical and hands-on experience throughout the 4 weeks.
Oh my gosh, this sounds like so much fun. So I might definitely take you up on your offer to come join your class.
Absolutely.
So I know, right? So now the game that you teach, it's you said that they learn the technology, but it's done virtually synchronous, like at the same time. Is that? I mean, so when you said,
Yeah.
explain this to me.
Yeah.
So is it a in-person game? I mean, a virtual instructor-led game, or is it an online game?
Yeah, the one that I have the certification program for is an instructor-led game. And the way the program works is that everybody comes together to play the game. By the way, you don't need to be in the certification program to play the game, okay? So if you do want to play the game, or if any of the people listening to this do want to play the game, I'd be more than happy to share the link that can lead them straight to a sign-up form where they can sign up and join us to play the game. I host a game every week on Thursday. Depending on the time zone that you're in, it could be either Thursday morning or Thursday night. And I run these certification programs once a month at the start of every month. And the entire program is built so that people can learn at their own pace. The only time that they have to be together is when they're playing the game, because it is a multiplayer game. But after that point, the entire game is self-paced. So you can go as fast or as slow as you want.
Oh my gosh. I think you just piqued everybody's interest. So are you going to share the link later?
I will. I'll share the link with you.
Okay. I guess it's too long of a link to like just say.
Yeah, it is, because it's kind of that encrypted thing, which is kind of a long link.
BXY21.
Something like that. Or you could, if you are interested in the certification program, you could just type on Google Evive certification program, and you'll definitely find it. It's going to be the first thing that comes up, most likely.
All right. Well, good. That's good to know. Okay. And so you actually teach people how to build this instructor-led game. And I think the thing that people probably shy away from is because they don't even think about how easily you can add gamification to your instructor-led trainings. I think most people are thinking about, oh, do I need to be able to use Unity Developer or something?
Yeah.
But there are ways where we can add gamification to the tools we already use. So do you ever share just simple tips like that about cheap, easy ways to start adding gamification?
I do. Actually, I'm a huge fan of using very, very frugal and simple technology and very, very simple tools to run games. And that's been my very starting point. You know, as I shared the story earlier, started with pen and paper. My first technology-enabled game was actually using WhatsApp and Microsoft Excel, and I built that over a couple of days, and it was a very simple game. My point is that you don't need to know, Unity and Unreal game engine and know C++ or whatever kind of coding that's out there. I'm just now learning coding, and that's just because I'm interested and I want to make some changes on my own games now. But really, you don't need any of those technological skills. What you really need is a shift in your mindset, because you can add game elements to just about anything that you can imagine. I mean, you remember when I invited you to play the game, I actually gamified the entire invitation. Do you remember that, Robin?
Yes,
Yeah.
which I really appreciated, which is also why I invited you to come talk to me. So I was like, oh my gosh, he's so clever. He needs to come talk to me.
So what I mean to say is you can gamify just about anything, and that's the coolest thing, because the moment you realize that you're the one in control, all it requires is a shift in your mindset. Then you can really start to do all kinds of incredible things.
So I mean, you have to have your favorite elements. They probably just kind of, you probably don't even mean to, but you pick the same things. Like I've kind of heard you mention a couple times, mostly like you're like narrative, story, fantasy. So do you have a few, pet elements that you really like to include or you like working with
Yeah,
when you, okay.
I do, and you really just caught me red-handed here, because I I definitely have some favorites, and when it comes to game design, I think there's kind of a trend in all of the games that I tend to design. One is that they will often, mostly in nearly all cases, unless I'm forced to not do it, they will always be something about sci-fi. Um, so they always have a sci-fi component or element to it, whether it's about superheroes, whether it's about the planet, or it's about extraterrestrial something moving to a different sort of planet or something along those lines. That's one of my themes that I really love to just continuously do different things with. And the other is more functional, which is most of my games are multiplayer, because I believe we learn in a social environment far better than we do in a single player environment. So a lot of my games are going to be multiplayer, where people can interact with one another, even if it's not synchronous, even if it's asynchronous, they will still be able to have that multiplayer feel and element to it.
Do you ever go into a situation and do consultation about how you could add some more fun to training?
All the
Well,
time.
of course, I'm thinking you do, because I mean, I'm just thinking about I feel like I am a huge fan of gamification, those elements, and I mentioned before we started talking that I did my dissertation on gamification of corporate training,
Hmm.
and so even in my academy, I am always looking for ways to drive competition, and I give
Oh,
rewards,
cool.
and we have budget badges and certificates and walls of win. And I was just wondering, like, when you go and look at, like, I don't know, like, I know you have your own certificate program, but when you go and look at, say, consulting on somebody else's project, what are some of the things that you look for that are like quick wins? Like if you were to come into the academy and you were to see, oh, how else could
Hmm.
you add more fun to your programs? What are some of the things that you look for? This is my own selfish question.
Sure. I'm so glad you brought this up, because incidentally, I'm working with a telecom, very large telecom client out of the Southeast Asian peninsula. And I'm helping them. They've got a leadership academy, and I'm helping them to improve engagement into their leadership academy. And it's very similar to the kind of question that you're asking now. And one of the things that I like to do is I like to first and foremost understand what's there. There's an old Japanese saying, "Ginsu Ginputsu," which means to go see and go look, and that's the first step before anything else, to just see what's going on. It's very easy to slap points, badges, leaderboards to things, but it's not always effective. And so my first step here would be to take a look at what you do. How does your certification program work, and what kind of game mechanics you're leveraging already, and then look at what can we do to enhance that. Of course, filtering it through the objective filter.
And what do you find are like the quickest ways to enhancing? Is like, for instance, I gave a prize
Hmm.
for if they completed the Do It Messy 2-week jumpstart within 2 weeks.
Hmm.
And so and like 31 people completed it, right? But it wasn't a required thing. And then I saw other people were like, oh, 2 weeks to get all that done is just too much. And they were stressed out, but 31 people got it. So how do you know if your game mechanic is successful? Is it about like the number of people that have success and have fun? Or is there a ratio of complainers versus winners? Or
Yeah.
because not everybody's got to is going to react to the game mechanic the same way, right?
Correct,
Or
exactly.
should they?
No, they shouldn't, and they won't, because that's people are different, and they different mechanics appeal to different people. Some people are competitive by nature, so they really appreciate the competitive mechanic where there's leaderboards and there's that sense of competition and one-upmanship. So that really facilitates their action and motivates them. While on the other hand, some people are driven by purpose. They really need to understand why they're doing what they're doing, and that facilitates and fuels their motivation. So your game mechanics have to be well balanced to be able to facilitate same kind of results for different people, and that's really where the art of game mechanics and game design comes from.
Yeah, I think that would be the art, because I like that I feel like you've already kind of given me some clarity by saying there's a difference between those that are motivated by competition and those who need to know what the purpose
Hmm. Hmm.
is. And so even when you do something like leaderboards competition, you are also thinking about the other type of learners. And then do you kind of um, include both pieces, those who do and those who don't like competition, or do you just add another element that will please those that are looking for purpose? Or
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. So depending on to what extent you're using the competition mechanic, as long as it's not overdone, you could introduce another mechanic that could facilitate and take care of the others. And you could use in some cases you could use a single game element that has a combination of multiple mechanics, which takes care of a lot of different types of people and what motivates them.
ooh, what's an example of one of those? Like story. Everybody loves
Story,
story.
yeah, story and narrative is another one. I think one of the things that really help you to understand these is also understanding human needs. And I don't mean Maslow's hierarchy. I'm talking about. I don't know if you've watched this TED talk by Tony Robbins, in which he talks about the 6 human needs. Have you?
No, but I do like Tony Robbins, so I'm actually writing it down because I have to go watch it now.
Yeah, it's a really cool one. It's one of my favorites actually, and he talks about these 6 human needs, and in it he talks about um, there is things like variety. You want certainty, but you also want variety, and so he talks about all of these different mechanics or different human needs, which are so essential. So when we understand these human needs, we're able to design our learning design and game design better in that way.
Oh my gosh, so it was like, okay, 6 human needs. I like was gonna Google it. I was like, I bet everybody wants to know what are the six. Okay, so the first one is certainty for sure, right?
Yeah. There's certainty. There is uncertainty as well, which is variety. I believe
Yeah.
there's love and connection,
Yep.
um, and I'm forgetting the others, but they're there.
Significance,
Significance. There you go.
significance, growth, and
There
contribution.
you go. You got it. That's it.
And so many of those, I really like you pointing this out, Mosin, is because this also is what adult learners, it aligns very well with what we know about adult learners, right? They want to contribute their own experiences,
Hmm.
right? And so it makes sense. I think it's actually probably even more enlightening to how we design things if we think about those 6 human needs.
Yeah, yeah.
This is a
So the
great.
competitors are looking for significance, typically, and so when they reach the top of the charts, when they're in the front, they get a lot of significance. There are those of us who like to contribute. So if the game had a multiplayer component where people play together and work towards a common goal, well, you've got your contribution right there. So it encourages those people to play. If you're talking about, love and connection, or finding some sort of a connection with others, you create those intimate conversations within, or reflective opportunities within your learning design. Now you're taking care of those people. So it's, we all have these 6 needs. They're just, they're at different proportions for each of us. And when we understand that, then we're able to design some of the games and learning experiences that cater to a very holistic set of audience.
Oh my gosh. I think that you just brought out the mindset that you've been talking about, that perspective. I mean, to think about just I feel like you've just made it so eye-opening to just talk about game mechanics and as far as the 6 human needs, right? Because that's just something that's a list you can go back to over and over again. Is that
Yeah.
something? What other kinds of lists or human needs or characteristics do you think about the most? Is that list what you think about the most when you're thinking about serving the different types of learners, or do you have other frameworks that you have stored away that you
Mhm.
want to point out to us, like other resources?
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is my go-to, especially in games for learning. This is my go-to list that I look at and think through as I am designing a game, or adding mechanics or removing mechanics. In some cases, your game will do better without certain mechanics. So some cases you have to remove mechanics. That's happened to me in the past, where I've thought about a certain mechanic and I said, oh, this is going to look really nice, or it's going to play out really nice, and then it doesn't happen that way. And that's one of the other reasons why play testing your game is very, very important, because you'll think it's going to unfold in a certain way, but it doesn't always happen that way. So this is one list that I look at. Another one that I use for designing games is something called a DPE model. DPE, which means Design Play Experience Model. It's a very, very cool model, very simple model. And it's one of the things I also teach in my game design class. Another one I use is Yukai Chao's Optalysis, which is a fantastic design system for gamification. And he's got eight elements in his map, which he uses to identify what kind of mechanics a certain brand or a certain game title has, or a certain learning program values and has. So the more holistic, the better. But then there will always be games that skew towards one or two or three mechanics more, or one or two or three sets of mechanics more than the others. So Optalis is that one. And lastly, I also use Jesse Shell's app, which is called Game Design. So you can find this on the Play Store or the App Store. And it's this, he's written an entire book on this, which is called Deck of Lenses. And he has this app. I mean, if you read the book, it's brilliant because the book is very, very insightful. But if you don't, you can still simply download the app on your iPhone or your Android phone, and you could learn about the various mechanics that you could filter your program or your game through.
Oh my gosh, what a rich resource. I can't wait to go check that out. So, Mohsin, you have been so open and generous with what you've shared today. Will you tell our audience kind of your best and final advice or tips for if they want to just start thinking about game mechanics and where they can find you, and of course your certification program, like how can they find your website, and yeah, just your best final advice for getting started.
Sure. Getting started, don't just get started. Don't think too much. I think when we think too much, we complicate things. Oh, what about this? What about that? And then we start to get in our own way. I would say just get started. Don't think too much. Do something and fail often, and keep trying. Learn from your mistakes along the way. I'm extremely open when it comes to feedback or suggestions. I've got so many people reaching out to me asking me about various ideas or evaluation. Can you play test my game, or can you take a look at this and let me know what you think? So I'm always available to respond. I'm on LinkedIn, so you can look me up. And if you're interested in the certification program, just head over to gamitar.com, GAMITAR.com, or just look up Evive Certification Program on Google. And yeah, my final piece of advice is get started and try it. Just go.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Like that's exactly what it is. I mean, you don't know what it is until you just start trying it out. Otherwise, it all just becomes a bunch of theory and words, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate your time and all that you've shared with us. And I'm sure everyone looks forward to connecting with you.
And I look forward to it as well. Thank you for having me here, Robin.
Thank you so much for listening. You can find the show notes for this episode at idlecourses.com. If you like this podcast and you want to become an instructional designer and online learning developer, join me in the Idle Courses Academy, where you'll learn to build all the assets you need to land your first instructional design job, early access to this podcast, tutorials for how to use the e-learning authoring tools, templates for everything course building, and paid instructional design experience opportunities. Go to idlecourses.com/academy and enroll or get on the waitlist. Now get out there and build transcendent courses.